Good. Close to the mind. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Podemos começar, não é? So, good afternoon, boa tarde, novamente. We are very privileged to have Professor Peter Scholten from the University of Rotterdam with us for the conference that will end, the last conference, the Governance of Migration and Diversity, a Complexity Perspective. And we are also very privileged because we have the public administration who really implements and puts in practice the complexity perspective. I will speak in English and then Portuguese. Temos então aqui o privilégio de ter o professor Peter Scholten connosco. Não se ouve ainda? Ok. O professor Peter Scholten da Universidade de Roterdão, sobre a perspectiva de governança e diversidade, a perspectiva da complexidade, e temos também o privilégio de ter aqui a administração pública que realmente implementa a complexidade na aplicação com as migrações. Before we start, I will introduce our 7th edition of the Academy for Integration. So, who comes from the north of Portugal? Who comes from the center of Portugal?
I also come from the north.
Yes. Who comes from the region of... And who comes from the south? So, who is here from the Ministry of Education? Okay. Who is here from schools and school mediators? Who is here from the health? Who is here from the Institute of Employment? Who is here from the Labor Inspection? Who is here from the Institute of Social Security? Who is here from the municipalities? And from municipalities and civil society is here from the local centers for integration of migrants. And who is here from the civil society Jesuit Refugees Service? And Refugees Welcome. And Association for Development. And who is here from the European Network of Anti-Poverty? Who did I forget? Oh my God. Who is here from the police?
The police. Oh, you forget the police.
So this afternoon ended with the group presentations of case studies where all the groups implemented 3 principles of public policy. Working in network, working in proximity, and spreading the information like fluxograms and how to implement based in the concrete cases. So during this week, it has been a dynamic learning where you have we have learned with us and we have learned with you. For instance, I will give just 2 examples. We have the municipality of the South, Beja, where they have shared how they solved or they tried to solve when they have realized they had trafficking with people from East Timor and showing how they worked in networking. or the program of the migrant children in health that was created. So good practices. I could say also others. And today in the group presentations, we really could see the implementation of what you theorized, which is a complexity perspective, which is working in mainstreaming, together with the field of education, employment, housing, documentation, and the other mainstreaming perspective. So ending with you is really, like we say in Portuguese, the cherry in the top of the cake. That is meaning really ending with the best of the cake, because we started in the opening session also quoting you, and now we end exactly with you. We also would like to share that tomorrow we had classes in the morning with academics and practitioners. We had the design thinking in the afternoon with engineer Anna Sands and Professor Raquel Matias, design thinking to better work in networking with the different entities. We had a thematic session on Wednesday with housing and the Migration Center. And we had 2 more conferences at night with night, yes,
Oh,
the national, the national coordinator of the new Pactum for Migration Asylum, and of all the migration projects of the municipality of Fundão, and of cases, best practices of labor inspection. And today with you, and tomorrow we end with a seminar with the entrepreneurs who work with foreign employees, and only in 3 companies there are 59 nationalities, only in 3 companies. So thank you so much. And I also would like to welcome everyone who is online, and especially the people from all the other 6 editions who are listening to you, and all the people who are present here outside the Academy for Integration. Thank you so much for coming.
I have this one.
You
Yeah. Should I turn it on? Yes, huh? It's on? Yeah, great. Yeah. Thank I'm so happy to be back here in beautiful Fundão. I'm very happy that you are offering me refuge, not just from the Dutch weather. It is amazing. Feels like summer holiday. But almost fire around migration. Whether you follow the news around that, but there were people who fire to asylum seeker centers in the Netherlands, and there are big political controversies around migration. So for me, when I could get airplane off, no media, no pictures of my country, and for life here in Fundão for a moment, and to learn from what you are doing. You're doing a great job. Last week I was studying a little bit how is Portugal doing, and I know I talked a lot, and you're also critical of, oh no, it can always be better. But for me, to see how Portugal, and last week I was in Bilbao, also there, you are pushing back migration that we are seeing in many European countries. You see it in Germany, you see it in the Netherlands, you see it in the UK, you see it in France. Italy was perhaps the first country where migration, the obsession, we'll call it, with migration became so powerful that it controls everything. You are doing something very good. And my aim of this evening is to make you so tired that at some point you tell me your secret. What is it? What is food, sun? What is it? I drinks. I can. Well, but I'm very so from you. See here in this beautiful introduction of really a representation of whole Portugal, but also from all sorts of sectors, levels, regions of Portugal, and that is super important. You have been talking already a little bit about mainstreaming. I will go there also again this morning, but only a little bit. Room migration as a part of your everyday life. Anything, any. Oh yeah. Okay. I have to peek for some names in a minute. I will just leave it here and I will peek. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so this is what mainstream governance should look like. And if you would go to, if you, is it better? Is it, yeah. Very close to the mouth, like this, even closer. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if you look at the Netherlands and Germany and the UK, the people who deal with migration are really in separate groups, separate organizations. And then you deal with migration only, as if migrants are very different and need a different than from other people. Or should I use a microphone? Is that better, perhaps? Yeah. 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 Yes. Okay, this better? Okay, we do it like this. Yes, great. So, while you were not following me, I was making you a big compliment, but I'm not going to repeat it. Yeah. So, I will go back into these topics during the evening, and I hope to learn from you how you're doing this, and I hope that you will tell me your secret. If not here, then during the dinner, after some nice drinks, at some point, I will get it out of you. And then when I go back to the Netherlands, perhaps then I do have something really innovative to tell to my country. And if not, then I stay here. And I've heard there are people of organization Refugees Welcome, and then I apply to that organization. So yeah, thanks for having me here again in Fundao. I would really like to thank, first of all, Claudia for having me back here. Last time I had really a short stopover, and then I thought I came from Sweden, and then I had to go back to the Netherlands. And then in between I was here, and I think, oh, I am making wrong choices in my life. It was only one night Fundao, and then all stay in Sweden and the Netherlands. So I'm very grateful, and I hope that we can continue also our intellectual conversation around the governance of migration and how to make it better. Because yes, we're academics, but Claudia, what I really admire in your, how you are an academic is also you make a contribution to society by running programs like this. So not just for the books or the articles, but really for making a contribution. I think that is super important. Also, a lot of gratitude to ipps-iscte. It's like a rap song. To ipps-iscte. For having me, and to the University of Beira Interior to having me, and to the mayors of Fundao, to the current mayor, Miguel Gaviños. I hope it's understandable in, you know who I mean, right? So it's very grateful to be here in beautiful Fundao, and grateful for the hospitality here. And also to the former mayor who is in hospital and following us online, Paulo Fernandes, who was one of the persons also instigated this program. And unfortunately, I had to miss the mayor last time already because of fires, and then this time again because of the hospital. But it doesn't matter, because it's an excuse for me to come back. And then at some point, I have to see the mayor. Good. I am going to talk with you about the governance of migration and diversity. I'm going to take you a little bit into theory. Yes, I promised that also to Claudia, and it's also, well, I'm writing a book about this as we speak, but I will constantly try to apply it to my country as a bad case and your country as a best case, to make you. It's weekend, right? So it has to make you feel good. I understand that you already had some parts that focused on the governance of migration and diversity and on mainstreaming, right? And what was it? What is mainstreaming?
Gee. Agora é complicado pensar em português.
Oh, now nobody speaks English all of a sudden. Who can help? What is mainstreaming? Oh. No, nobody. No, they were sleeping. Oh, what? Yes, it's too early. Yes, yeah. Okay, I'll come back in half an hour, and then you tell me. Yeah, yeah. You tell me. Okay, I get started. So I'm going. It's almost weekend, so I bring in some film tips. So then at home with your partner, you can say when your partner says a lazy evening and I just want to watch soccer or 24 cooking, they say, no, I have a professional license to watch this movie because it's important for my education. So I have a few tips during the evening. One is this Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Anybody seen that? So you do speak English. What? Yes, yeah. Was a trick question. Yeah, no. So yeah. I get it. Yeah. So yeah, migration. I am actually not a migration scholar. Everybody introduces me as a migration scholar, but I'm not. And one of my colleagues, I saw the book of Hein, my dear friend and colleague. That's Hein's book, right? Yeah, yeah. He's a migration scholar, a real one. And he's from Amsterdam, I'm from Rotterdam. That is like somebody from Porto saying that somebody from Lisbon looks good or something like that. So then, you know, if that happens, then that person really looks good. So this is really a good book of Hein Haas. He's really a migration scholar. I'm a political scientist, a policy scientist. I study migration as a case, as an exceptional case. And actually, in our master programs on political science and public policy, we take migration as what we call a revelatory case. It's such a curious case that it tells us a lot about what goes right and also what goes wrong in politics, policy making and public administration. And I think this is very important also to your lives, because what a lot of people do in practice, media, also policymakers, is they treat migration as exceptional. And they say migration is just the odd case, and now this is just emotions, and this is just empathy, and this is not really a serious policy area. I see that in many countries, and I think that's a big mistake. Rather than saying that migration is the odd one out, we should really be studying migration governance and diversity governance very seriously, because it tells us a lot about us, and it tells us a lot about the quality of politics. Remember the term quality, because it's going to be very important. The core question, and this is actually since I was a master student and a PhD student, constantly the question now, what is wrong with this policy area? Because there are only conversations about failure, about paradigm shifts, and in many countries, but I studied you a little bit this week, you don't really talk about migration crisis so much, right? Is there any crisis talk? Means integrating migration into general public policy issues and services such as, okay, yeah, a quote from Mr. ChatGPT, or no, he's a real person. That's really good. Yeah. No, it's really good. Yeah, yeah. Thanks to Augusto. Thank you, Augusto. Yeah. But is there any talk here in Portugal of migration as crisis? Do you see migration as crisis, like in France, in Spain now also a little bit? No, eh? There's not a lot of crisis talk here. You see, this is why I wanted to come here. You have to tell me what you're doing, why this is not crisis with you. In the Netherlands, it's the crisis. Huh? We don't talk about climate, inequality, war, you know. The 8 o'clock news starts with migration crisis. And it's the same in Germany, it's the same in France, it's the same in UK, it's the same in Italy. Yeah? It's not a topic, it's the topic. So I think in that sense also important to look at us and to learn from us and to prevent making the same mistakes as we have. Yeah? I think that's really important. So my aim is constantly try to understand what's wrong with this curious case. With a case where it's constantly crisis, also words are always contested. Any word, integration, diversity, inclusion, a term like climate refugees. It's a term we use a lot, but it's not a legal term. There's no government in the world that recognizes the term climate refugee, yet there are many climate refugees. So many countries are abandoning integration policy and then they take inclusion or diversity, but those terms are also not really very neutral. So there's also a problem with words. We talk about that also more today. So rather than saying this is an odd case, this is just strange, this is just, I chose very early in my life, I said, okay, this is a very curious case. And I have devoted my whole academic career to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what crisis is then perceived, and is there something like a migration crisis? Then I am going to talk a little bit about complexity, and then I'm going to ask you again what mainstreaming is at some point. That's point 2. And then 3, I'm going to talk about what goes wrong in responding to complexity. Because it's one thing to observe that a topic is complex, there are more complex topics in the world, but why do we then often see policy failure in areas of complexity? And the last part, the 4th part, because it's a Friday evening, we have to end with a positive story, is also how to get beyond the idea of migration as crisis. So how can we prevent it from happening? So those are the 4 building blocks that I will go through this evening. So first of all, migration crisis. So what crisis are we then really talking about? And there has been very nice research by Carvalho and a few other very serious methodological statisticians from Switzerland. And they taught us that everybody tends to overestimate the level of immigration and the amount of migrants in a certain country. So that's probably due to over-focus, so over-fixation of migration, only paying attention to increases of migration, not to decreases. So all over the world, we see that people think that there are more migrants than that are actually there. And that immigration is higher than it actually is. So it's one of the reasons why people think migration is a crisis, even when it's not. So, and excuse me for that I left the Dutch things there. I didn't have ChatGPT in the airplane to translate it for me, so I thought, okay, it makes sense anyhow. But if you look at Europe, there is no increase in asylum migration. It's just not there. And whole Europe thinks it's there. I'm quite certain if you would run a public opinion poll, 90% of the EU citizens probably think that asylum migration is constantly increasing. It's not true. It's even decreasing since 2015 a little bit. If you compare it with the 90s, it has also decreased a lot. What was a big refugee category in the 90s in Europe? Any idea? From the Balkans, yeah, the Yugoslavians. That were a huge number. You see, there's the problem with language. Then I immediately say, oh, it's mass. But in terms of quantity, that was far higher than what it is now. Also from Iraq, when the Europeans went to war in Iraq, wars cause asylum migration. So all that also happened in that period, and that led to migration. So there's no increase. Also, the IOM World Migration Report 2026, very recent, says that only 3.7% of the global population is an international migrant. Only 3.7%. And there is war all over the place, there's inequality, there's climate change, and only 37,000 people decide to move to another country. The core question is absolutely not why are there so many migrants. The core question, and that's really how we start our migration master in Rotterdam, why do so few people move internationally? So few people. This means that more than 96% of the world does not move internationally, in spite of all the opportunities with airplanes, cars, funding, inequalities, reasons to. So we should not be so obsessed with migration. We should be obsessed with immobility. Why are we so immobile rather than mobile? And Claudia, especially for you. If you then, we have this obsession for immigration, but the big thing that people are ignoring, and this is EU figures, is the increase in emigration. And also in my country, that is really increasing a lot. And that's usually white Dutch people, that's not migrants returning, that's white Dutch people who become mobile and who work in other countries. So emigration is also a very structural phenomenon. But of course, that is less problematized in Europe than immigration. So, together with Hein de Haas, if you look at the facts, not a lot is going on. Another movie, Ghostbusters. Who has seen Ghostbusters film? I want to see hands. My God, what do the others? You did not see the films of Ghostbusters? I am shocked. Oh, how can that be? This is, yeah, I really have to digest that for a moment. Anyhow, but this is a little bit how I see my role as scientist. Because what I don't see my role as is that I tell you as policymakers what to do. So the old model that scientists tell you what to do, that doesn't work. But I also don't believe in a post-truth society. Facts matter, science matter. But then in the role of Ghostbusters, Mythbusters, I would say. So what I constantly do is it doesn't matter whether you are from the left or the right, or the extreme left, or the extreme, or from the north or from the south, as in this case, I will try to check whether what you're saying has any backing in academic evidence. That's how I see my role. And that's where, again, Hein de Haas, my friend from Amsterdam, we have the same focus. So, the quantity of migration, that's the first myth. There are not many migrants in the world, there are very few. So if you go to a family party this weekend and somebody starts again bashing that there are so many migrants, no, it's just not true. So that's end of the debate. That's, well, if you're in politics, it's the beginning of the debate. But then focus on refugees. Also in my family, I don't come from a super liberal family. Also in my family, always focus on refugees. But refugees are one of the smallest types of migration. The biggest, what's the big, did I say? Oh no, I already put it there. The biggest migration streams are labor migration, very important here in Fundao, I've heard, and law of migration. Is that also important here in Fundao, or you don't do that? Yeah, you do that? Oh, yeah? Yeah. You want to talk about it? Yeah, yeah.
My wife moved here from Ireland.
A law of migrants. Look at that. Yeah? You see, this is empathic about migration. So those are by far the biggest categories. So refugee migration is just tiny, tiny, tiny. So everybody who obsesses with that, then you should ask not why are there so many asylum migrants, but why are you also obsessed with asylum? What's wrong with you rather than with the asylum migrants? Then international migration is tiny, but domestic migration is sometimes quite large. There are a lot of rightist people who are now, pointing at Africa as a big danger, but most African migration is domestic. Domestic migration can be very substantial, but it's often not described as migration. It's also, what is immigration versus mobility? Yeah, oh yeah. It's also that in the past, people always thought, okay, if migrants come, they never go back. Because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, with guest laborers, also Portuguese who went to France, for instance, then the idea was, okay, then probably they will stay, become permanent migrants. That is actually not what we're seeing. The term migration, when your grandchildren are in university, I don't think we use the word migration anymore. Because what we see sociologically is mobility. People are mobile. People actually move quite often, if they move. They move more often. And it is very possible to move back or to move on to another country. So not migration, but mobility. Development and migration. I love it when, just to show that I not only make leftist arguments. So I love it when countries invest in development aid. It's great. You need to do that because development is very important. But what would not be true is that investing in development of countries limits migration from those countries. That is just not true, because it's almost a one-on-one relation with the economic development of the country and migration. So only the poorest countries do not have any immigration because they are too poor. So once a country develops, you'll get more migration. And if it develops further, you get even more. Right? So development should not be connected to migration as it often is. Climate, this is perhaps one of the most interesting ones, because when I was younger, I was actually teaching my students, say, oh, climate change leads to massive migration. Actually, almost all the scientific evidence shows the contrary, that climate change deprives people of the means to migrate. So you can have the aspirations, but if you don't have the capabilities, because you are too poor because of climate change, then you actually don't migrate. So climate change does not lead to mass migration, as some people tend to think. Yeah, and then some people always think that society today is much more diverse than ever in history. That's also not true. I think certainly not in Portugal with your the global empire that you had. But if you go back in history, then also in the Netherlands, we did a very longitudinal study on this. Every time the Dutch economy was strong, the country was very diverse. And every time the economy collapsed, then you saw a de-diversification of society. And you see this for centuries. It keeps going up and down in that way. And diversity then is a symptom that you are doing very well. Because the countries that become less diverse are the countries that are economically going down. No, I'm going to skip this, unless there are sociologists in the room who want to talk about Ulrich Beck. I'm so hoping that somebody says yes, and then I will discuss this slide. No? Oh, yeah, no, okay, too bad. Anyhow, then I continue to migration and complexity. So, these myths are a sign that people think about migration too simplistically. Migration is one of those topics that people just want to simplify and then talk about it in the pub and the family party. It's a little bit like gender in the past. Gender was also a topic that was highly complex, many intersectionalities relate to gender relations, and then people always flattened that debate, simplified it in cliches. The same thing is going on with the complex phenomenon of migration. So what I say is we need to understand that complexity if you really want to work with it. And that is quite confusing. There are a lot of policymakers here in the room who are very courageous. Because in the Netherlands, if I tell them, first you need to make your topic be much more complex before you can get, well, a first starting point of real understanding, then I've lost the whole room already. Then they say, no, we just want to fix problems. But yeah, you can't do that if you don't understand the real complexity of the phenomenon. So that's why I'm gonna first startle you a little bit, confuse you a little bit. The myth busting was already a little bit of confusing because I think you need it before you really can start acting on migration. So what I think migration crisis is, it has nothing to do with migration, but it has to do with an error in our minds when we are faced with complex topics like this one. So migration tells us not so much, migration policy tells us not so much about migration, but about our incapability to really handle social complexity. And migration there is revelatory. You see this in many other areas, but much more strongly here. You're from the police, in the security area, you see many examples of this, where there are very complex phenomena behind security threats, sometimes faced by very simplistic policies by governments, and then the local actual police officers notice that they are making things worse. And then sometimes you see that these frontline workers have a much better understanding of the complexity of security threats, of domestic violence, for instance, than what you actually see in politically formulated policies. That phenomenon, you see that enlarged in the area of migration. So yes, there is a crisis, but not a migration crisis. There's a crisis in how we deal with complexity. And for those who want to know, that was the argument Ulrich Beck is constantly making. Ulrich Beck constantly says that we are living in the 21st century, but our institutions and our language and our ideas are from the 20th century. So we think very old-fashioned about very modern problems. So this is Ulrich Beck in a nutshell. Yeah. He said much more than that. So if you want to study sociology, come. So what is so complex about migration? One is the complexity of diversity itself. So diversity often tends to be simplified in terms of, oh, these are the Ukrainians, these are the Moroccans, these are the Iraqis, or these are the labor migrants, these are the love migrants. Whereas in reality, you see many complexities, fluidities between those categories. So those categories may be alive in our minds, but they may be much less alive in the minds of the migrants themselves. How many nationalities were here in Fundao?
How many nationalities?
74. Well, are they all living in their own neighborhoods, or are they, are they mixing, or are they all separate? They are mixed, yes, yeah. So that's often what so policy categories tend to say, these are the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians need this, and the Ukrainians should have that policy, and they should live there and there. And in reality, often that defies, starting with what do Ukrainian people want themselves, and perhaps what do people want themselves. And then often you see that, for instance, differences in educational backgrounds, differences in gender, differences in age, it's huge. For instance, I've been studying the Dutch Moroccan community. The gap between the first generation, so the old Moroccan migrants in the Netherlands, and their kids, their students, their adolescents who are in my university, that gap is so huge. And you can really not speak of one category, and they also don't let me. If I would do that, I would push back heavily, and they say, no, I decide how you label me. You can't describe me as just a Moroccan migrant community member. We call that the diversification of diversity, or as Steve Furteweg said, super diversity. Was that word already used somewhere? Super diversity? Yeah, you say now no because no, was not used. Yeah. So super diversity, that's really that complexity. That diversity has become more complex. That every time you think a policymaker wants to make a target group directed policy, or somebody speaks about a community as being one united whole, then you need to think of this concept superdiversity. Then you need to think about, yes, maybe Ukrainians, but what about gender? What about language? What about education? What about income? What about all the other facets that you can think of? Then that means in order to address the complexity of diversity, we should not use an ethnic lens. And this is what in Europe we are very used to. So we label migrants ethnically, based on their descent or their cultural origin, their cultural background. And the studies of those migrant groups show that they often don't want that themselves. It does bring in a lot of dilemmas, because this raises the fundamental question, what do you do with single ethnicity organizations? This is a big topic in my country. So do we work together with Ukrainian organizations and with Moroccan organizations, for instance? And in some cases, it actually works quite well. When there's no contact and you want to make first contact, then it usually works very well. But if a community settles further, we see all sorts of inadvertent effects of single ethnicity organizations, where many people from that community say, no, I don't want to be seen as just a Ukrainian. I want to be seen as a student at Erasmus University. Or I want to see as a woman. I want to be addressed by gender policies, gender security issues I'm facing, for instance. So ethnic lensing can have dangers also in it. Yeah, this is just a snapshot of my own city, Rotterdam. In Rotterdam, it's now no longer 52, this was 4 years ago, now we have 56% of the population that has a first or second generation migration background. So there are no majorities and minorities in the Netherlands. If you want to bash the right, you say everybody is a minority, but the term minority has lost its meaning. Actually, the right says migrants are the majority, but that's also not true, because I deliberately made a mess of this graph. My tools with ChatGPT are better than this. I did this on purpose, just to show how many different nationalities are there in Rotterdam. And many of them are bigger than 5,000. So even if you would want to have a targeted policy for every group, it would be impossible. There are some. Yes, yeah. I have no idea what those people are doing in my country. If I were them, I would go back. Why? Voluntary to come to, no, anyhow. It's not just diversity, it's also mobility patterns. Some migrants stay and settle permanently. That's still the case for some. Some say, this is just, short. We see that with a lot of Romanian and Bulgarian workers in the Netherlands. They really stay for a year, and then, they often after studies and before they want to find a partner or buy a house, and they stay in the Netherlands, earn some money, and they go back. Most people are stuck in between, have no idea. Even if they say, yeah, I may go back, there is no serious indication that they will. Or if they say, yeah, I may settle, no indication that they will actually settle. So this is a very important point, because the majority of migrants, especially of the first generation, live in uncertainty about their temporality. And this is something highly overlooked also by migration studies, because we think very linearly. That somebody leaves one place, you go on a journey, you arrive, you settle, you integrate, and you become a citizen. And that's also what your government policies are based on that model. That somebody leaves, goes on, arrives, integrates, becomes citizen. And what we see with more and more people, not just migrants, because the label then doesn't really work anymore, is that they just have no idea whether they go back, stay, move on, or whatever. And that leads to this very interesting concept, floating societies. And you see that, for instance, in the city of Rotterdam, we did our first quantitative study of this, that 4% of the city is floating internationally per year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that means that in 10 years, 40% of the whole city population has been mobile internationally. And then add to that the nationally mobile people, then you have a city that is constantly floating. So that raises all sorts of questions. There are people here from labor inspection, for instance. So who controls, how they work and what their conditions are and what rights they have? Because there are a lot of people in certain positions. So what rights do they actually have, and is there abuse of those rights? It also changes the concept of integration. Who are you integrating? If your majority of your city is floating, what is the purpose then of integration? What is the purpose of citizenship? And this looks like happy clappy, and I think it is nice. Rotterdam is a very flourishing and constantly innovating town, but it also has downsides. So we see closing of schools, and in our city, in our downtown area, with all those high-rise towers, there's more and more closures of supermarkets. And then we had some students studying that. It was very interesting because you think, oh, with all those high-rise towers, there must be huge supermarkets in downtown Rotterdam. But what happened to be the case is that many people who have those apartments, they stay there sometimes, and often they are not there. When they are there, they're not really living there. So this temporariness becomes dominant, and they just don't use institutions like schools, or they don't go to supermarkets so much. And so it does something with livability of urban areas. Urban sociologists are studying this a lot. Okay, I've talked about this too long because it's so interesting. Oh yeah, why the Red Cross in this great book of Thomas and Zanicki. Anybody knows the Polish peasant book? No? It's the founding book of migration studies. And this is the book that all migration students read at some point in their career. Do they do that in your case also? Yeah. Because this is really the book that studies the Polish migrants that went to the US and then settled and integrated and became US citizens. That model does no longer work. That was a different time. People were not mobile back then, and they are now. Last thing is that this complexity that I was talking about in terms of diversity and mobility, it's not just diversity and mobility, it also comes together differently in different places and different towns. So you had this graph already, right? I saw visual proof that it was used, right? Yeah. Yeah. So what is it about? Yes, migration. Yes, it's about migration. Yes, thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, I will save some time here, but this is very important. Many of you are also from municipalities. So what you sometimes see is that one municipality just looks at another one and then copies what's happening there. That does not work in a complex society. Every city has a different economic structure, different history, different legacy, different political constellation, different type of urban planning also in the city, and that matters a great deal to where you are as a city. We did a vast quantitative study of types of cities in Europe. I can tell much more about that, but that would be a separate lecture, so I'm not doing that. So this also, this is the complexity approach. So if you acknowledge that complexity is there, then your policy needs to be different. You cannot silo migration or diversity as a department somewhere in a corner of your office building, of your organization, where there are people who deal only with migrants, and migrants only deal with them. Now, mainstreaming, dealing with complexity of migration means that it affects everybody. It affects economics, social affairs, housing, health. A lot of health people here. Health is very important. Without health, no integration. Without security, no integration. Without labor, no integration. And so you need all those parts. And that in this room I find very positive. In the Netherlands, if I would go to a room like this, there would all be people who work in the diversity and inclusion department of city so-and-so. And that's not a positive development. Diversity is, it affects everyone in every part of your organization. We talked about this already enough. I know what is already to come. So why does it then constantly go wrong? And not in your country, because you are going to tell me the secret why you are doing it right. But let's look at the other countries, my countries, for instance. What are we doing wrong then? Well, actually, a lot of policy scientists already predict that when a topic is very complex, you get things like crisis, policy pathologies, policy alienation, degenerative policy designs. These are two grand old ladies, Schneider and Ingram. Their book, Policy Design for Democracy, was one of the reasons why I became a scientist. Because they really explained me the importance of good policies, of the quality of public policies to make thriving democracies. And back then, that was the 90s, then you can estimate my age. The 90s, early 2000s, perhaps 2010s, no. And then I was, so then, you know, saving democracy sound like boring, because democracy is there and to stay forever. And now you see the fall of democracies. In my country, we had a fascist government for 2 years already. Germany, it's likely with the alternative for Germany, alternative for Deutschland. France, the UK, look at the local elections. There was a fascist party that won the local elections. So democracy is collapsing in many of those countries. So Schneider and Ingram, that's why I put them back in my presentation. They deserve some more credit. And I think the work that we are doing here is not just about migration. It's also about making sure that our democracies survive. We should not be naive. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why you are doing better than we. Your democracy is more recent than ours. So ours is older, and we have probably forgotten its value. And I think you may have more recent memories of why it is important to have a democracy. That if I would go to secondary school in the Netherlands, there are not many youngsters who find democracy an important value. That is how far. I'm not really advertising the Netherlands. It's a great country, nice buildings. You know, just don't talk to the people. No. Oh yeah, you married somebody from the Netherlands. So why did you do that? Yeah. Why were you silent with love migration, by the way? Anyhow, so why is going wrong? Well, because we are obsessed with problematizing migration. So this is an obsession in media, in politics, also in any family party that I have. I can, if I want to go home in 5 minutes, I can end any family party in 5 minutes by just bringing up asylum or student migration or anything like that. So why is that? Why can't we stop talking about migration? And we is then almost the whole of EU except Spain, although I think Spain with the collapse of Sanchez is also going there. You are one of the few countries that are not really constantly talking about migration. Why? One is language. And that's why you have to be careful with the language that you are using. If you want to stay this enlightened country, then be careful with the words that you use. A term like crisis, where you're constantly problematizing migration. Also, not just problematizing migration, but migranticizing other problems. That is a mechanism you should be very wary of if you see that happening. And I know what I came across this week is that housing is a big issue here. And that's one of the topics where you do see a little bit of a starting point of this migrantization of the housing problem here. I'm looking at you to hopefully you say that's not true. But what I see here is a similar, what I think I saw here is a pattern that you see very powerfully in the UK and the Netherlands, where we have a housing crisis because we have a neoliberal regime, which means you build houses for rich people and you don't really build houses for poor people. So then you get a shortage of houses for poor people. But then we blame the asylum seekers for that. Because they come and take away the houses that we didn't build for poor people. So the housing crisis in the Netherlands is very much migranticized. So we made a study of that. 7% of the shortage of housing would need to go to asylum seekers, which means that 93% goes to white Dutch people. But that was not really sensible in the elections. So you have to be very careful of that type of mechanisms. Not just when extreme right parties problematize migration, but also when they connect others. Security is also such a topic in the Netherlands, where then crime, which is going down every year, that there's this obsession with crime amongst asylum seekers. And this obsession is totally defying the facts that Hein de Haas and we have produced. All media and politics, they really are very successful in constantly trying to give this impression that asylum seekers are more represented in crime figures than non-asylum seekers, which is not true if you control for age, demography, gender, income, for instance. Then even they are less represented in crime. This is a very important mechanism. So language matters. Actually, in many countries, we saw that language changes first, and then you see the rest following. So extreme right comes to power after language changes, not before. So this is an early warning sign. And some say it happened more often throughout history. This book of Robert Cohen, about moral panic. It's a great book, Moral Panic and Folk Devils. It shows that we are not so different than most other countries across the world, which also have this tendency to define a part of the population, and usually migrants, as the folk devil, the scapegoat. This is what many countries do. And the language, it comes in very naturally and easily. People are psychologically predisposed to be affected by that. So that's why language is so important. But it's not just language, it's politics. And I on purpose do not discuss politics first. Because once again, you see change of language first, usually, and then you see change of politics. But migration is political theater. And also here I saw, I don't remember the name of the party anymore, but you see in almost all countries across Europe that migration is the topic on which elections are won and lost. Even if migration decreases, still migration is the topic on which political battles are constantly fought. And it's the topic where rightist parties, the rightist parties use migration as the stick to beat other parts of the political spectrum very successfully. Also, this is historically not unprecedented. That happens more often. It's a very common political strategy to instrumentalize migration for political purposes. What you see here, and this is the study of Carvalho, a really nice study, 25, very recent, where you see that political saliency, so when language changes, when politics captures that and enlarges it, it's only then that you see that the mass changes its sentiment towards migration. So it's not the case that the people become wary of migration and then the anti-migrant parties come in. It's the other way around. So it's anti-migrant parties that create this platform for anti-migration sentiments and feed into language, feed into other stuff. What also does not help is that migrants do not speak back. So it's very easy. There have been some countries where this also happens against farmers, for instance. But there you don't see the same power structure because farmers speak back and are very powerful in many countries. And migrants are not, so they are an easy target. That does not apply to my city anymore. So that's very interesting if you look at London, for instance, if you look at Rotterdam, if you look at some other European cities, you see that by being xenophobic, you would immediately lose the elections. Because that's the power of demography. If you are anti-Muslim in Rotterdam, 35% of the population is Muslim. So if you want to lose the elections, then you do that. So you see even the populist parties in Rotterdam, you see them now saying, we are not anti-Muslim, but we are for affordable houses for everyone, and we are defending the poor people. They basically take over the role of social democratic parties. That's what I see in a city like Rotterdam. Very interesting. Is there media in the room? The media is bad. No, media role is very important. This is not just politics. Media plays a very powerful role in keeping this obsession going. It creates a platform for this language, for this obsession, for constantly talking about crisis, constantly focusing on bad news, on incidents like security threats. Then if there can be 100 asylum seeker centers in your country, 99 are okay, one incident in one, it will be on the front pages. And then psychology just makes people think that it happens more often. Also, when immigration increases a little bit, it will make headlines. But there is never a headline that says migration has decreased with 10% this year, because that's not a headline. There's this nice, there's not a film, this is a book, Power of Bad, famous book. It's in almost any bookstore. It's very accessible reading that explains why the media always focuses on bad news, and also why you can test it with your partner. If you want to give feedback to your partner, then if you tell one good thing and one bad thing, your partner will only remember the bad thing. You look good, but you don't do the dishes. Then it does not go. So it's the 1 to 5 rule. So if you want to be constructive, then you say you should do the dishes, you don't do that very well, and you look good, and the weather is nice, and you're smart, and something like 5 things, and then it's balanced. And actually, the media cannot help it. This is just you. This is psychology. So you remember bad news more than you remember good news. And migration is super vulnerable to that. And so you are professionals working in that area, so you have to be very mindful of those emotions. So if you talk with people in your city or in your organization, and you want to have a balanced reporting on migration, then you need to understand this power of bad news. So if you want to restore that, it's not very easy. You should then bring 5 points of good news then perhaps. And it's really a good book for in our media society. I'm a political scientist, there are media scholars, but it was really a book, when I read it, I understood our society much better and the key role of media in our society. And media is perhaps even more important than politics nowadays. And institutional delegitimation. This is a beautiful postcard from the Netherlands. No windmills. This was this week. Fire to an asylum seeker center, big riots, although the media calls them protests. And then I always say, I didn't see any protests, I only saw riots. Yeah, but you have to take them serious. I said, why do I need to take them serious? Anyhow, I will, that's more for during the drinks than it's my therapy to... but this is why it's more important than just migration. Migration is used to delegitimize our core institutions of our democracy. And I can't put that with enough emphasis, because you still have those institutions in the Netherlands and in Germany and in UK, and Germany of all places. Their institutions are collapsing, which means and collapsing does not mean already civil war. Institutions collapse before you get war. Science, trust in science. Even in my country, I'm one of the 3 migration scholars. If I tell my own mother, mother, asylum migration is decreasing already for 3 years, she does not believe me. Because belief in science is just too small. If I go on TV like this week and then I say, asylum seeking is decreasing, the Netherlands is in the bottom half of the EU in terms of accepting asylum seekers, we should receive more rather than less asylum seekers, then the journalist just does not trust, does not believe me. And then say, why are you saying that? You're not taking people serious. Then I say, no, you are not taking the people serious, because you are telling things that are not true. So this is how a post-truth society operates. So be mindful of that. Once journalists start doing this, you're far away. Media also, strangely enough, the confidence in media is decreasing, mainstream media. Because people only want to look at media that repeats the story that they want to hear. We call that echoing, echo chambers of media. That is super important in migration. So the people who need to hear that asylum seekers are less represented in criminality than Dutch people, they will not hear me because they are in other media channels. They don't believe mainstream media anymore. And the same applies to government and politics. They don't trust government and politics because they have gone so far in this crisis and this obsession with migration as a problem that they don't see the government anymore as something that really protects them, which the government does, but they just don't see and believe it anymore. Looks scary, huh? Yeah, it gets better later, just before the weekend. I don't see this in Fundao. Here, peaceful. I see no riots. There's no racist propaganda when I land on the airport. It's really good. It's really good. Yeah. Perhaps I stay here. Yeah. Anyhow. So how to overcome this crisis and how to make things better. And this is the focus of my study and of my next book. Hein de Haas, who wrote that book about how migration really works, he constantly, he says, oh, I'm so disappointed, he says, because I then tell people how migration works, and then people don't listen. And I say to Hein, you are very naive, because do you really think that a minister then reads this book and then thinks, oh, I never looked at it that way, and now I'm going to make entirely different policies. That's just not how a society works. So there has to be much more in place to have good quality policies. So that's why I'm writing another book about the migration obsession, what goes wrong, that's the part so far, and then now also a model about how to overcome it. And this is a model of complexity governance, and it's a model where I put the term quality very central. And this is a term that has been, well, rejected by many scientists, and they say, well, this is technocracy, this is old positivism. But I really believe that we need to talk about quality. And I come from a very post-empiricist, relativist type of thinking in science. I think that's, I've grown more mature now. And now I've learned that you have to talk about quality. You can't say that everything is relative and it's just how you look at it, because that's the reason why we are in so much trouble. There is really something like quality that we should talk about. And in my terms, quality has 4 sides. And it has to do with the 4 reasons why there is an obsession. And that was language, migration talk, power, politics, how politics deals with it. That was institutions, institutional delegitimation. And that was, what was it? Oh yeah, irrationality. Myths, don't believing in science. So what should we do? Oh yeah, this was what I was just telling about. So what should we do? So one thing that we should do is invest in the rational quality of policies. So should that mean that you have to read the books of Claudia's team and me, and then just apply that and then you're good to go? No, yes. And no, that is 90s, 60s, 70s type of science. That does no longer work. We are not saints. We don't know the absolute truth. So we are not saviors in science. Okay. That being said, science does matter. Evidence does matter. So you need to constantly test and assess whether what you are suggesting in terms of policies, whether it really works and whether it really contributes to solving a problem. And so there should be at least a serious conversation with the problem situation. So this is an old book, 1994, it's old in my terms. But I can't phrase it better than that. So there's no absolute truth. Yes, we know that, boring. But what we do know is that you do need to have a serious conversation with the problem situation. So if you are making policies, or you're implementing policies and you don't have a serious conversation with the problem situation by collecting facts, by assessing what you're doing, by having evaluation and monitoring studies, by collecting feedback, very important, from the people that you're actually working with. If you're not doing that, then you're failing rational quality. And yes, that does matter. So we don't live in this post-truth society. And there it is important also to learn from others. You cannot copy, if you're in Fundao, you cannot copy the model from Porto. Because Porto and Fundao are two entirely different places. But you can look at mechanisms in Porto. And then if you recognize some mechanisms in Fundao, you can look at cities where you see the same. And then you go there and you see, oh, what are you doing? And then you try something out. And then you test it again. And you should talk with scientists like us so that we can then debunk any myth that you may have in your policy. So that's very important. Perhaps the last thing also there, the last point to add there, is that economics matters. What? The what? Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. That is very important because a lot of people forget that. But here, I think also with labor inspection, I think you understand it better. But 90% of migration and diversity can be understood only through economics. So when it really goes wrong is usually when there is a separation of economics and how you deal with migration and diversity. Those two need to be strongly entwined. In the Netherlands, we had this very positive policy of culturalization of migration with good intentions of helping them. It backfired heavily because it led to a cultural obsession without any respect for economic processes that go well or that go wrong. So economics is important. So. The other one is democratic quality. You should prevent political alienation. You should prevent this political theater. You should prevent that migration becomes a purely symbolic topic. And one of the ways to do that is to really also engage with the groups, with the people, I say groups already, but with the people that you're talking to, that you're working with. And that can be migrants. Migrants should then not be just a follower, but should be an agent in your policy making. That is also democracy. Democracy is not just rule of the majority. There's no democratic theorist that ever has said democracy is a dictatorship of the majority. That's just not true. You should talk about it. But it also means that you should talk with society. So emotions are part of your migration and diversity governance. Also the emotions of non-migrants. So don't be afraid of emotions. It's part of good democratic quality that everybody can talk about migration and can engage with you. So democratic quality matters, a sort of checks and balances. Also to give migrants also a voice in the policies that are about them. The other one is institutional quality. And so the institution should be equipped to deal with migration in this mainstream strategy. So migration and diversity should not be siloed, should not be set apart, because if you do that, even with good intentions, it only feeds this obsession with migration as a problem, because that's why you have a separate policy, and with migranticizing problems, because you have a separate group about it, people who are expert on it, and who then really go really go into this tunnel of focusing only on migration and forget about how important labor market, housing, economy, NGOs, mainstream institutions are for migration. So institutional quality matters there. And there are a lot of problems here. One is, for instance, multi-level governance. The problem of multi-level governance is that the way that migration is discussed at the national level is often very separate and very distinct from how it's discussed at the local level. So that's not institutional quality. You cannot, for instance, so if you're a migrant in Fundao, then you experience policies from Fundao, you experience policies from the province or the region, from the country, from the EU. And if there's too much dissonance between it, It can be highly confusing. So in the Netherlands, often cities send very welcoming messages. Say, welcome to Rotterdam, everybody's a Rotterdammer, and Rotterdam is diverse. And say, be a citizen in Rotterdam, participate, and then you're part of the city. And at the same time, the national government says, you are only a citizen if you speak Dutch, if you feel Dutch, and if you abide to Dutch norms and values. So this is one migrant in one country, in one city, getting two entirely different messages. And that's highly confusing. So that happens in many countries. That is a problem with institutional quality of your approach. And the last thing is discursive quality. So how to talk about migration. Mind your language. And that's also me as migration scholar, we have made a lot of problems. We have made a lot of mistakes. Perhaps in the future, people will even say, this Scholten is very old-fashioned because he was talking about migration and migrants, whereas these are just mobile people or something like that. So you have to be reflexive about these words. Think also about a term like guest laborer, which makes somebody temporary. Think about a term, no, this is perhaps even a better example. Do you use the term second generation migrants? Yeah. Okay. Don't. Drop it. Yeah. Because the second generation migrant has never migrated. So why would you use the word? So the word is exclusive. It's excluding people. Then my students, who are some third generation and some are second generation, they hate that term. They say, I am born in Rotterdam. I am raised here. I go to Feyenoord, that's the local soccer team. You probably never heard of it, but we are very proud of it. You know, I support the Dutch soccer team. You know, I'm from here. So if anybody uses the term second generation migrant, it is actually an institutional form of exclusion. Even if you do it with good intentions, like monitoring how they are doing, and then you want to help them, by using the word, you are not helping them, because you are setting them apart. So what actually is better, we use it massively in the Netherlands. So we are, as a university, really arguing it against it heavily. So what you should do is look at what is the problem. Is the problem language, which rarely is the case with second generation? Is the problem education? It can be even culture, religion, pedagogical background, anything. I'm not saying there are no problems. There can be lots of problems in second and third generation. But you cannot, at face value, assume that it's because they are second generation migrants. So that term, don't use it. And first generation migrant, even there, some people say, yeah, should you always use it? What is a better term is, are you a citizen, yes or no? A nationality, yes or no? Or foreign or native born, yes or no? Because then you refer to a legal distinction, which you can still problematize, but that legal distinction is at least objectifiable. Then at least nothing is perfect, but better than other concepts. So mind your language, mind my language. If you look back in my track record, I've published a lot about second generation migrants. I'm leading a journal. Claudia is also involved in comparative migration studies. We have an ethical charter where we say you cannot use the word unless you prove that there is a meaningful reason to look at it. So if you use it as face value, then you cannot publish with us. And that's with more categories. So we should demigranticize where possible and migranticize only when really necessary. That is for me always a rule of thumb. So that does not mean that you can never talk about migrants. So for instance, Ukrainians arriving here in the first month, if you then say, oh, we cannot talk about that you are just here for 1 month, yeah, that is, of course, that will be ridiculous. So you can't do that. But then it's because it's necessary. So you migranticize when necessary, and you demigranticize when possible. And that's how I approach almost any matter that comes. So there's no golden rule that says in Portugal here, now there's the boundary. You have to make that analysis yourself every time you are faced with that problem. And then one thing you should do, and really mind in your country, because this is the early warning signal for a Dutchification of Portugal, and I don't see that as something positive, is that once people start talking about crisis a lot, then you have to be on your guard. And I hope that all of you are writing open editorials for your newspapers and telling people there is no crisis. Crisis talk is dangerous. Okay, I'm approaching the end now. So what does this actually teach us then? This talk about migration obsession and what goes right and wrong in complexity governance. It does not tell us so much about migration. It tells us a lot about how we deal with migration. It tells us more about you, how everybody's working with migration, than about how migration actually works. And even more than that, it tells us how we are evolving in the 21st century from a risk society, a society that is constantly responding to external risks, to a crisis society. So a society that is constantly producing and pretending that it is in some state of crisis. And you are doing relatively well, but if you look at the rest of the EU, we constantly believe we are in crisis. So the EU has become a crisis society. And it's not objectifiable, but it is a strong sensation in the European Union. And that is a crisis not imposed on us from the outside, it's one thing that we have produced. And again, go back to Ulrich Beck, it's produced because we are living in the 21st century, but our state, our books, our schools, our language is still from the 20th century. So that's why we are constantly experiencing crisis. A crisis not really in society, but a crisis in our minds. That's what migration scholars would. And then my last positive message, if you really want to overcome this, then keep taking quality very seriously in your work. Quality matters. So it's sometimes better, so it's not always important to be nice or to be empathic, but it's very important also to have good quality institutions, policies in place, and to really talk about it in that way also, and to substantiate that. Quality is very important. We have lost quality too much out of sight. All right. That was it. Thank you very much. And I am very curious now what you think of the Portuguese case after having listened to me. And who wants to tell me your secrets? Yeah.
Portuguese? No. Thank you so much for your talk, because it was like having several classes of a semester in 1 hour. So, and with the theory, and in a very accessible way. Thank you so much. We will do a summary in Portuguese. Maybe you can compliment me in what I forgot or escaped. So I will now switch to Portuguese. Então, o professor Peter Scholten falou de, em termos de migração e de governança da diversidade, porque é que tantas vezes está em crise, e agora muito nos mídia, e começou por falar porque é que falamos tantas vezes dos 4% que migram e não dos 96% que estão em imobilidade. Falou depois dos mitos de migração, portanto, porque é que tão poucos migram, que a maior parte das migrações são migrações de trabalho ou por amor, enquanto que o que a maior parte das vezes se fala é de refugiados. Falou que o nacionalismo muitas vezes esquece, os discursos nacionalistas, que as sociedades são historicamente construídas com pessoas imigrantes. Depois falou da crise, a chamada crise de migrações e complexificação da diversidade nas migrações, e dando um exemplo muito concreto, por exemplo, as pessoas ucranianas que vieram não querem ser vistas apenas como ucranianas, querem ser vistas como estudantes, como mães, como trabalhadoras, como pessoas que que vão ao ginásio, que leem, que passeiam, e não apenas com os granquenianos. Vimos a diversidade de Roterdão, onde os portugueses são um quarto grupo. Lembram-se de dizermos que muitas vezes a emigração portuguesa é muito invisível. E aquilo que também fomos falando ao longo desta semana por diferentes palavras, não há um modelo que sirva para todos, não é? E deu aqui muitas vezes o exemplo que o modelo para o Porto não é um modelo que serve para o Fundão. E isso torna mais complexa a governança de migrações. E que a diversidade afeta todos os setores, daí se falar em mainstreaming, em política transversal, de educação, de emprego, de habitação, da parte social. Depois disso que estamos a falar aqui não é só de migrações, mas é também de democracia. Há uma obsessão com as migrações e falou de 4 pontos. O primeiro, a linguagem, não é? Por exemplo, dando o exemplo na Holanda de que o mercado da habitação está em crise pelos migrantes, quando na verdade está porque a maior parte vai para os ricos, mas fala-se nos 7% da habitação que vai para os refugiados, como se fosse uma grande percentagem. Segundo, políticas de migração, a migração em política, em que a migração se tornou um teatro político, muitas vezes no Parlamento. Terceiro, a pós-verdade na sociedade de migrações, e deu o exemplo do livro O Poder dos Maus, quando os mídias também trazem percepções baseadas em mitos. E depois o quarto, que as migrações se apoia, não sei se é assim que se diz em português, deslegitimar as instituições políticas. E como é que isto se ultrapassa? E para isso temos que falar da qualidade racional, e aí voltamos à economia, estúpido, é realmente a economia que regula as migrações, a qualidade da democracia, a qualidade institucional e a qualidade discursiva. E o que é que isto nos ensina? Entre outras coisas, que estamos também numa crise da sociedade. Não sei se querem complementar.
Só um pormenor muito rápido, que houve aqui uma associação importante de que a crise dos refugiados, na realidade, tem por trás uma desinstitucionalização da qualidade do sistema democrático, não é? E a tentativa, e também de descredibilização da ciência.
Exatamente, da própria ciência. So we really had several classes in one only conference, and with the theory sustaining it, with that we really thank you. I also want to thank your very generous words to the organization. Being the coordinator, like all coordinations, they only work well when they have very good teams, and so I thank to Raquel, to Hannah, and to Filipe for organizing this together with me. And I think we have been having a change in Portugal, but compared to Netherlands, it's softer, and it's good that you showed us that. I think one of the biggest changes in Portugal that we had is that the social shame is being lost. So a vergonha social está-se a perder.
Social shame.
Yes, yeah. Because previously there was a social shame in speaking of others as others.
Yeah.
And with the extreme party in power, that is being progressively lost. And that is really a danger, like in schools and other places. And maybe because this was very sudden in Portugal, we are a bit, we feel this, at least I feel, as dangerous. But compared to other countries, it's much sooner and it's much later compared to what you have shown us. Então, não sei, quem quer fazer o primeiro comentário ou pergunta? E nós traduzimos. Sim. Sim, ótimo.
So I'm not sure if, hi. I'm Pedro, I'm from the Social Security Institute for the Social Innovation area. I'm not sure if this is scientific, but I think that we have kind of a delay in Portugal. So the 2008 crisis we only had in 2012-13, or the far-right parties like Brexit or Vox in Spain, our Siga, it came, Siga, yeah, it came after that. So thinking with this in thought, there was a sentence in your presentation that really resonated on my mind, which is complex problems require complex solutions. What the far right is doing is giving simple solutions and a simple speech to the people. So what democratic parties and scientific investigators have to do to apply these ideas in a simple way and to be understood in a simple way to the people?
Very good question. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. What is very important, two things. One is that this, one very positive, and then also as a political scientist, a point. I think it's very important that societies, I think that a vital democracy, a democracy that has critical reflexive debates about a topic like migration, that there is sufficient pushback against this type of simplifications. So what I'm very surprised of in the Netherlands is that where I thought my country had very strong institutions and people were very reflexive, it apparently was very easy in one generation to bring down very simplified stories. I'm still sometimes amazed about how, for instance, this migrantization of the housing crisis. It is so obvious, I think, that the housing crisis is due to 16 years of neoliberal rule. And then to blame it on asylum seekers, and then even in my family, I think almost everybody believes that it's really the case. So even, I'm so far that I don't really hold it against them anymore, because they are also a victim of this societal discourse that has become simplified. So they read newspapers, not even far right, they just read middle right newspapers, and they have become simplifying because of also commercialization of media. So the media needs to fight for attention, simple news sells, complex news doesn't sell. And there you go. And this is like this incremental process, this creep in society. And there is very important to push back. And there's not one force. It's also not that if you're Chega, sorry, yeah. So we should not blame it all on Chega. So you should also not make Chega too important. So the extreme right parties, they usually follow after the damage has been done. Then they become big. So the damage is done before that. And usually it comes from much more mainstream sides. It comes from how people believe in media, yes or no, whether people still trust scientists. Yes, it is I think it's more important than we often talk about it. It's about whether, and that's my second important point, and there I am critical also of left politics. If you are in politics, then do politics. So what I find so incredibly disappointing in my own country, I'm a scientist, I do vote, but I'm not going to tell you. And I am very impartial. I'm sorry, I try to be as impartial as possible. I think that's the most honest answer. I'm so disappointed that the mainstream parties in the Netherlands have not really stood up and have shown guts in really facing this monster head on. And that they some of them were hiding behind a tree and hoping that it all would go by. And they did not really give a good story to society about what they do want with migration and how important migration is for the Netherlands. And that most migrants are love migrants and labor migrants. And without labor migration, my tiny country, the Netherlands, the economy would come to an immediate collapse. The Netherlands needs migrants. So it's such an obvious story to give back to the people. If you don't do that, why are you in politics? So it's like a soccer team that then, after one touch, they say, oh, no, don't want to play soccer. I go, no, if you play soccer, then you play soccer. Or football, sorry. Huh? Yeah, 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 yes, yeah. Yeah, you should play the game by the rules. And it's not like it's not like my mom has to read the government statistics every week like I do. And so it's understandable that he follows what political leaders say and media say. So if they don't stand up, then the extreme right is the consequence of that. It's not the motor of it. We should not make the extreme right too important, because they are not. The damage is already done. Yeah. Sorry. I can talk very long because this is in the heart of the Netherlands now. Yeah.
Just to make one comment, but then pass the word. No, I think we're not broadcasting, right? So then I don't need to use that, please. Thank you. Thank you. I don't have a question, I just have a comment. And so I want to pass afterwards to you for your question. What I feel is we often get so paralyzed by our lack of influence on the media. And it's so impossible to fight that, to fight social media with positive messages. You need to go 100 positive messages against one bad message. 5 to 1, I feel is more 100 sometimes. Yeah, exactly. So one thing I felt about what your point on institutional quality was, if public administration technicians who deal with immigration every single day from different regions and institutions are given the time and the recognition to deal with that complexity. If they can do meetings between themselves, if they can have time to speak to immigrants about their complex problems, if they are recognized by doing so, then they are fighting the media somehow. Then they are creating a really nice workforce to do that. So this wonderful set of people have dealt this week with very, very complicated cases with a lot of unknowns. They've done incredible. I really hope they make a lot of questions and they share their experience, because that's what we have done this week, is to take the time to embrace and recognize that complexity. Thank you.
Yes, I echo that. So there's a lot going very right in society, and often a migration obsession happens in spite of all the good that is actually taking place in your lives, in your working lives, rather than thanks to. So yes, I join that. But also I want to join it with a call to you. And this is a little bit, in the Netherlands we have this saying, you can be right, but that's not the same that people actually believe that you're right, that you're correct. So you can do the right thing. It's not the same thing that people actually know and understand and that they hear you for that. So also for your good work, the media is not naturally your enemy. So it's very important that the work that you're doing, that you do look for the media. So don't hide, don't keep it to yourselves, don't be afraid. So go to media, go to politics. If you don't do it, you make it only easier. Then you are like that one soccer team that leaves the field. And now you have to join that field and show what you got. And you have to show it a lot. It's part of your work, because migration, it's emotion. So you cannot say, oh yeah, I don't do emotions because I just help people to go to work. No, actually your work and the reason why you get to do that work and how people understand your work is inherently emotional. So you work with the police, sorry that I point so much to you, because we use the police a lot of cases, but the police understands very well that everything that they do is emotions, because safety is a feeling. You feel safe. It's not something that you can really objectify. It's the same with migration. You have to take those feelings very serious. So you have to tell people what you're doing, why you're doing. You have to go to the media, send them texts. When they call you, pick up the phone to give them the story. If you don't do that, you feed that monster. So you do more than only do your work. It's really important. It's really important, yeah. You didn't, you didn't, you didn't ask your question.
Yeah, I have several questions. Hi, Peter. Welcome to Fundão. I have
Thank you.
several questions to make, but I only going to make two. Okay. The other ones you have already answered in your presentation.
Over the drinks later, the rest.
Okay. No, but just two questions. You said it in an interview to Público newspaper last year that left-wing political forces doesn't have a counter-narrative to far-right ideas regarding migration.
Yeah.
Do they have it now?
In my country,
after,
no, in my country, certainly not.
But
Yeah.
the second question is, what kind of narrative should be built?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I have thought about it a lot. I'm a political scientist, so I do talk about politics and political parties. Like, it's not that I shy away from that. So very good questions. So I think in general, the left has still not has a response. So the left has left itself being beaten by migration. The left behaves like a team that leaves the field, with some exceptions like Denmark. Denmark is perhaps not a positive example. There, the Social Democrat Party has become more or less a populist party, which is not so strange, because populism is traditionally owned by leftist parties. Theoretically, communism is populism, right? So the fact that it's the other way around is, in terms of political science, it's still strange, because cultural conservatism, that's elite stuff. Identity politics, nationalism, that's something for rich people. So usually populism is for poor people. So Chavez type of, that's populism, what political scientists write about. So it's very strange that the right has hijacked populism. So what should be a good story, what I've never understood, is that leftist parties are unable to push back the identity politics. So whereas our life is ruled by economics, where do you want to work? How much do you earn? Can you earn your own living? What do you want to become? Do you want to go on holiday somewhere? Money. Money is the heart of whether we like it or not, you are all capitalists. You are it. It's in the deep DNA of you. So why did left never managed to push back this irrelevant identity thing in the 21st century, where nationalism, who cares? If I open my phone, it's the whole world on my feet. If I watch TV, do you only watch, does anybody watch Netflix here? Raise your hand if you watch Netflix. Oh, are there a lot of people who only watch Portuguese TV? Yeah, mainly, okay. Most lives, so social life is super global. So nations are less relevant than ever, speaking as a sociologist. So how on earth can you then let the people who say that nations are important, how can they win? And how can you fail to tell people that it's not identity, but class that matters a lot? How can you fail to tell people that many migrants, and actually the people who vote extreme right, are often people from poorer classes? How can you fail to tell them that you are of the same class? You go to the same schools, you are exploited by the same people, you are told the same lie. Why? So it seems like such an easy story to tell. So it's so strange that they have given that terrain away. And that's still when every migration scholar will say, migration is economics. And if you stop migration, I think also here in Fundão, what I've learned from Fundão, but certainly in the Netherlands, think about the UK after Brexit. The whole economy comes down because migration has become harder. So migration is an economic necessity. Migration is a symptom of capitalism. So if you want to talk about migration, problematize, you can do it out of a critical capitalist lens. And that is a leftist argument. So why has the left never done that? I'm not going into politics because I I can't lie very good. My wife always looks straight through me, so I can't lie. So, so I have to be able to lie, and I get very angry. Like I got angry on TV this week, and then this journalist said to me, "Oh, but you are then not taking the sentiments of the Dutch people serious." I said, "No, you are not taking them serious because you keep telling them that there is an asylum crisis and there is not." And my wife also told me in the evenings that you got angry, eh? I said, yeah. I can't help it, yeah. So I'm not going into politics, but yeah, this is not, so we blame the right too much. I think the strength of the right is often the weakness of the left. Yeah, 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 the left should play football or go home. That's what they should do. Is that apolitical enough, or is that no? Sorry.
So I'm Ana Prata. I'm a mediator, a linguistic mediator in a school in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to make you a question. I'm trying to speak in English a little bit because I'm some. Yeah. But I'm going to say something about this. First, I'm going to say that I really love to hear you, because you said some things that I didn't think before. But now I'm going to say something about this, about the fear that is a political product.
Yeah.
And people are stupid and dumb. We're still very stupid and dumb. And we use this fear to control. So it's like the story of the bad wolf and the 3 little pigs. Everyone knows the. So if you look at,
I'm going to use this in my new book.
I hope
this
so.
It's so nice. Yes.
Yeah, it's. I was trying to. I was writing here because we can look at the 3 little pigs as the migrants that come. So the wolf in the story is really bad, and we have the wolves in our countries. They have homes of bricks, so they very well installed in the society. And they're the ones who say that they're going to protect the pigs. So, but then it's more important to maintain the fear, to control people. And we have the fear that we provide. We have to have sources of this fear, the new fear. And migrants, they really provide that fear because they're strange, because they came from far away, because they bring things that we don't know, you know. Yeah. So even if there's a lot of people in our country, in Portugal, well, let's talk about Portugal. I'm not very positive about our migrants politics because, like you said, Sweden, you're very good in the how do we say, acolhimento, hosting. Well, yeah, and we don't know nothing about that. we didn't get wrong because it didn't start yet. It's just like that. That's why looks like we okay, but we're not okay. We didn't start to doing that. We don't know how to do it yet.
You are
okay?
Starting. Yeah.
This is very nice. This is very good what's happening here. Yeah. But this is one thing, and you know, and comparing states, it's just saying that it's you getting wrong because you try a lot of things. We didn't get wrong nothing because you didn't try nothing yet, you know? And that's it. Thank you. It's very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I mean, this is so nice, the wolf and the 3 pigs. I'm really going to use it. I'm also thinking of the reverse, perhaps, and the migrant is depicted as the wolf, and then the people see themselves. Yeah. Yeah, and then people see themselves as innocent pigs. Anyhow, I'm going to play around with this metaphor. It's very important. I agree with you, and then I'm going to be a little bit critical. So I agree with you that fear is very important, this politics of fear. So you just told, a whole body of literature in sociology in a metaphor about pigs. It's really nice, because this disciplining or controlling people by fear, governmentality, is very important in sociology. And it happens throughout history. Yeah? So the Romans, they also knew that when things get very tight at home, they started waging war with the Germans or things like that. And then they say, oh, it's not, it's not Caesar, it's the Germans. They are the enemy. Trump understands this also very well. Wage a lot of war and then distracting attention from home and then saying it's the Muslims who are the fear. It's not, yeah, exactly, yeah. But, so yes, so you're clear there. But we are not, unless there will be a utopia, and if there is a utopia, I will go there with my family, retire. But people are inherently flawed. Fear is a psychological driver. So one of the first lessons in political psychology will say there are a lot of emotions, love, empathy. The most powerful emotion is fear. And there you can say, oh no, not me, I'm not. Yes, also you, because that's how your hormones work. So fear controls your mind much more than love and empathy. That is also because in history, when we walked through the forest, we needed to remind that one, what is that? One fruit that was poisonous, that knowledge saves our life. So we are genetically predisposed to be fearful people. You are all frightened people. So it's a very strange story of a Friday afternoon. You go very depressed into the weekend. It's very important. But that means that if you want to understand the migration obsession and you want to do something against it, you should not pretend that fear is not there. You should deal with it. That's why I keep telling you, don't act as if emotions are just irrational things in the margin of your activities. That's again the police officer in the room. I'm just doing this to prevent that, anything will be said against me. They will understand this power of emotions and fear. So you need to address that head on. This is an early mechanism of the migration obsession, when fear gets focused on migration. And everything that you are afraid of gets migranticized. And then you need to act upon that emotion and try to control it. Perhaps even you need also to play the fear card. If I were a leftist politician, which I will never become, because they will not let me, but then you can also play the fear card there. I don't understand why the political left lets the right get away with a story of zero migration. Because zero migration means massive economic decline. So you're actually telling people then that the paycheck will decrease massively. So in Netherlands we would say you hand out free beer. There's no such thing as free beer, but politicians win elections with that. So why can't you play that fear card? So what happens if we don't have migration? What happens if we don't have tolerance towards migrants? So the remembrance of having authoritarianism is more fresh in your country than mine. And so you can still point at that fear. And so what happens if democracy goes down? So if fear is there, then don't pretend that we should get rid of it. Then use it in an intelligent way. Yeah.
So I'm Inês Oliveira from the police, as you already know. Well, first of all, I don't like to make the distinction of right and left. I prefer to make the distinction of good and bad, right and wrong, first of all. And with this point, I think we should start to think what we want for our society, for the Europe. I think that it's the point. And we have to start to think about that. What you really want for the Europe. Not what we want for Portugal, for Spain, for the Netherlands. What do we want for Europe?
That's the narrative that we should create. Huh? And if you look at history, we have had narratives about migration, where it was clear that a country, the United States, wanted to develop its economy. It knew very well it needed migration. The Netherlands, in the post-war history, we knew that the Netherlands, without migration, would not be restored. So it was an integral party how we saw post-war reconstruction of the country. And there was a story that we shared. We told people why we wanted, there was a plan around that. And we need that story for Europe. Behind the scenes, there are a lot of people making that story. I can tell you that also in The Hague, by the way, but certainly in Brussels, there are a lot of people preparing, while we are having more and more restrictive anti-immigration policies, there are a lot of people preparing for proactive immigration policies because of population decline, because of the Netherlands is a knowledge economy. It cannot work without migration. So behind the scenes, this is being prepared already. I'm very critical of that, because you first need to tell people the narrative on why do we actually need that, and where do you want to go with the society? What is the place of migration? And even the people who are so afraid of migration, they need to understand that migration is important for, well, to fight against population decline, or to develop the economy further, or to develop the knowledge economy. So it's a story that you need to tell very actively. So the response to the migration obsession should also not be that we never talk about migration anymore. We should talk about it in a better way, in a more higher quality debate. That's what I'm advocating. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have only more 5 minutes, and I have a question.
Okay.
But did you know that 2 years ago, the award for the best cheese in the world was the cheese soalheira from Fundão?
The best what in the world?
Cheese.
Cheese.
It was not Gouda. It was soalheira from Fundão, the best cheese in the world. And today the team,
impossible.
They are going directly to the event there. Yes, no,
This
it
is
was.
populism. This is, don't believe those scientists.
And many people who work in the cheese field here, they are migrants, actually, yes. So the team is going there to that event, and
Nice.
So we have
Yeah.
only 3 minutes,
Yeah.
but I will share a question from Cristina Domingues, who is from a former edition of Academy Plus Integration. She said, one of the questions, and very shortly, is how can we in day-to-day, in the contacts with family and friends, help to deconstruct myths when people are not available to numbers and facts. People are caged in a cage of sensationalist, populist narratives. Yes, an easy question to answer.
It's very easy. It's wait a few months, and then my book will be ready, and then buy it, my book.
Okay,
and then,
okay.
No.
And then
What-
you come back to Fundão to launch it also in the next edition.
What is very important is that you do keep talking about migration critically, also with friends and relatives and everyone. And also that scientists like Claudia, like the whole team, it's important to not just do academic publications, but when the media calls, go there. When you want to say something to me, write an open editorial. When you want to share one of your best practices, share it. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it, because people need to know. If you don't tell the people, there's no way that they will know it. And so you cannot prevent Portugal from getting into the migration obsession by hiding. You should actually be more active than before and tell your story and join the emotions, but then set other emotions against the emotions of fear and tell another story against the lies that are being told. That's the only way. And you cannot point with your finger to only that radical party whose name I already forgot. That's too easy, because that's never where it starts. That's only where it ends. It always starts in other places, and usually where me and also you are much closer. So this is actually the parties where you go and perhaps don't speak up. Or these are the articles that you didn't write. Or these are the arguments made in the media that you did not object against. And every time you don't do that, it gets a little bit easier. So it's very important that you speak up. And keep Portugal, beautiful Portugal, and prevent that you get these strange pictures from the Netherlands, that you get that here. So it's good that you only get started, because now you can learn from our mistakes. And don't make the same again. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we can
nice
keep
bedtime
together now
story.
in the dinner. You can keep making him questions, okay? Thank you, and we'll go to dinner
Thank you.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.